Anyone got any questions for the panel?
Neil Cleland, Glasgow University. I'd like to sort of overview and encompass a couple of things that were said today. Primarily the question at the end goes to the first and last speakers of the session this morning. Doctor started in the overview relative to the fact that we have an impetus and an inertia in our activities in the Western world relative to climate changing activities, which means that even if we stop now, we're still going to be adding to the carbon. The other thing that he said was said by the audience was that some of the activities, and I now refer to what was discussed in this session, would again, in their essence, add to carbon emissions and other environmental impacts before seeing an effect. I was conscious, as I said, for the first and the last person speaking today in this session, that concrete's not the most pleasant substance for its environmental impact into itself. And I wondered for the first person speaking this morning from Skanska, whether you'd encompassed sort of the life cycle of these materials into that model that you had with the white, the green and the dark green as an objective, rather than just passing on some of the environmental issues up or down the supply chains. And then for the last person, are you going to do again the same kind of thing? Are you going to do anything about the given production? It's all very well monitoring carbon, but what about the actual production? Monitoring the concrete, but what about the production and life cycle of that concrete?
Is this working? Oh, it is, yeah. I think in terms of actually using concrete, what we've been doing recently is looking at a whole range of materials, but it's not just about the production of concrete, it's about the actual cost and use. It's about the thermal properties of concrete. So whilst concrete might be seen as being harmful to the environment in terms of actually the production, the actual thermal uses of concrete can actually dramatically reduce the actual energy uses in a building by using the thermal properties. But also, and I'm sure John will talk about this as well, is now looking at alternative forms of actual concrete, almost carbon-free concrete. So we're now spending a lot of time in research and looking how we can reduce the cementitious parts of concrete, but also looking at the energy sources from the actual concrete plant. So why are we using fossil fuels for energy for concrete plants when we could be using other forms of fuel? So you're looking at it from a complete cradle to grave situation. I hope that answers your question in terms of use of concrete.
I mean, you're absolutely correct that the production of cement is very, very energy intensive. And particularly in not only energy consumption, but also with CO2 emissions during its manufacture. So anything we can do to remove that cementitious, that Portland cement component, gives you something that is more environmentally friendly. And there's a lot of very useful and interesting research going on, not only within our own institution, but right across the globe, on looking at things like Portland cementitious material which are free of Portland cement. We routinely use things like blast furnace slag, fly ash, microsilica, metakaolin as replacement materials. And if we take that to its logical conclusion, if we remove the Portland cement component completely, as we can do, and we can activate these pozzolanic materials or latent hydraulic binders, we can actually form a material which, say, doesn't have any cement in there at all. So you're removing that energy-intensive component. So there's a lot of exciting work going on in this particular area. But you're right, it is energy-intensive, and there's no denying that. So again, there's a lot of research work trying to address this problem. The other thing, actually, interesting thing about Portland cement is it actually removes carbon dioxide from the air. There is a process called carbonation process, where you get atmospheric CO2 going into the concrete. So you actually get, I say, a removal of that CO2. Although it's put in a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere in terms of its production, but over its life, it actually absorbs CO2. I think there's some interesting work could be initiated there, finding out, well, how much CO2 does concrete actually absorb or take out of the atmosphere over its working life.
Does anyone else on the panel, do any of the design BIM guys have anything you want to add, or shall I move on? Take the next question. There's a gentleman here.
John Carter, you are focusing on the concrete. Can I ask? You are focusing on the concrete. Can I ask which type of concrete you are focusing on? There are a lot of types of concrete. And secondly, you are suggesting some monitoring at the design stage. So what will be the modality of that monitoring process?
I think it's when you're installing monitoring systems, you have to make a decision, particularly if you're putting sensor systems into concrete. A decision has to be made at the design stage, at the planning stage, that this is the option that you want to take. I want to install monitoring systems, therefore, so you're getting in right at the beginning. So it's really part of the decision-making process, that you're thinking long-term, because when you're looking at design, you're not just thinking about the structure as built, but it's got a design life of whatever it might be, 100, 120 years, if you're designing for sort of ultimate limit state. Its service life might be slightly less. We normally talk minimum service life, we want 50 years. But the types of concrete, I'm not quite sure what you mean by concrete, but we've got looking at a whole range of structural concretes. Not only using lots of different types of replacement materials, and there's no question about it that these replacement materials do give you a better quality concrete in terms, quality being defined in terms of reducing things like the diffusivity and permeability of the material. Does that answer your question?
Hi, I'm Rebecca from Edinburgh Napier University. We're final year students studying sustainability. Could you give us any professional advice in terms of opportunities to address the issues noted today in our future careers?
Are you asking anyone in particular, or just the whole panel?
Anyone.
I think I'd ask for a short answer from each of you, because I think that's a quite interesting question. Do you want to start at Jim's end?
Oh, thanks very much. Well, as far as I'm aware, obviously you've seen the area that I work in. I think there's a whole area of tools that need to be developed to support design and manufacturing in all kinds of environments, and the capture of knowledge and that kind of thing. So I think if I was going to develop a career now as a young engineer, I would get into that side of things. How can we use 3D digital environments to reduce our carbon footprint by prototyping, by planning energy processes and procedures, by building sustainability into design and using them as evaluation tools for buildings and structures of all kinds. There's a whole area where we can reduce our carbon footprint by doing things more cleverly up front. And I think the tools that I was talking about will enable you to do that. So I think there's a career for young people in that area, definitely, and capturing the know-how so that we can educate and train people like yourselves to take up those roles.
Well, as I mentioned, is this on? Yeah. Can you hear me? From our perspective, from an architectural practice of some size, we bring in disciplines into our own practice. I think one of the critical things to learn and what you need to sort of, let's say, adapt to in future careers is that there are so many different kind of workflows and situations. So I guess what I'm trying to say that we have great need for specialists and so on that covers a range of issues, but we also have a need to develop our own workflows in which these specialists becomes parts of our teams. And I would assume that's the same case in many different areas. So ranging from, let's say, the design tools and so on to business administration. I mean, how do we facilitate the overall project? So I guess my point is really that the need is big, and maybe it's good to add on to that interest in sustainability other interests to direct towards. In my case, architectural practice has a great need, the whole building industry, of course, but there are many different roles to take on with those skill sets.
Thank you, Jonas. Fred?
Okay, so you can work in my research area. It's great as well. I don't know. I think I'm going to give you more like a citizen's answer. What I think are very important areas, I think things like rethinking the way societies are organized and functions in general, I think will have an immense impact on our sustainability, our global sustainability. So I like ideas of architecture, urban planning, urban organization. We know now that most people live in urban environments, and this is just going to increase. And I think this is where we can make a lot of differences. And the second aspect I think is important, which goes with Jim's comment, is the digital modeling world, being able to do something entirely digitally, do it virtually, to test it before actually trying to do it, I think is a great chance that our modern society has compared to previous societies. And I think there will be a lot of developments in this area. What we talked about BIM today, we are just scratching the surface of these things, and we have a lot to develop.
Thank you, Fred. John?
Maybe I could just sort of continue from when I was speaking just a few minutes ago. I think there's a lot of scope for development of new types of materials, particularly low energy materials. The construction industry does produce quite a lot of anthropogenic CO2. So I think there's exciting developments in new types of materials. I was alluding to some there earlier on of alkyl activated materials. There are things like geopolymers, which are another interesting area. And I think that maybe the construction industry can be quite conservative and stuck in its ways about using new materials. So again, it's been innovative and not be afraid to look at new materials in construction.
Thank you. Finally, Alex?
I think it's a really exciting time in the construction industry just now. As you saw from my presentation and some of the other presentations, we're just at the start of the journey. Only now are we starting to tackle some of the issues with regard to climate change. And John's absolutely right. We are extremely conservative in the construction industry, and it takes us a long time to move forward. And I think we're playing catch up in the UK. As I said in my presentation, I think there are other parts of the world that are ahead of us. If I go to one of our construction sites in the UK, on a large site, we'll have probably 4 or 5 health and safety managers and 1 environmental manager. If I go to anywhere in Scandinavia, it's the complete reverse. They'll have 1 health and safety manager, they'll have 5 environmental managers. I think we've a lot to learn. I think the other thing is a lot of the presentations today were around the new build environment. That's buildings that we're building today. That has a minuscule effect compared to the existing estate. All the buildings that are in all our cities that were built way back in the 16, 17, 1800s. There's a much bigger problem that we have to tackle there, and there's a lot of work to do. I sat here probably in Heriot-Watt 30 years ago, actually listening to John tell me about concrete. I really wish I was back here now and actually looking at the opportunities there are in the actual low carbon economy. People have likened this to the 70s and black gold when actual oil was discovered in the North Sea. So I think there are some fantastic opportunities in all areas of industry, whether it's public sector or private sector. A real opportunity, and we have to grasp it. We have no choice. We have to grasp it.
Thank you. I think we'll take one final question.
Hi, Mike Reid from Grant Thornton. We're an accountancy firm. We've come across quite a number of companies who may have quite a strong sustainability strategy, but they're not very effective at embedding that strategy. And I was very impressed with the Skanska presentation in terms of their whole philosophy and some of their methodology. I just wonder, Alex, if you could maybe outline perhaps what were the 3 key things that have made your organisation embed sustainability through the organisation.
Is there any one in particular you're aiming that at, or?
I think it's me. I think it's me. I think the first issue is it's a moral obligation to actually make sure that we are developing sustainability. Our industry has a massive impact on society, and it leaves a legacy at the end of the day. So I think that's the first thing. It's a moral obligation, and we have to do that by visible leadership at the end of the day. That's what we have to do. We have to demonstrate that we're taking this seriously. Hence my discussion around our green car policy and ensuring that all our company cars are below a certain CO2 level. That's a big statement, I think, to make. So I think the first thing is the moral obligation. Second thing is we shouldn't be afraid of commercialising sustainability and green. I think that some other forms of some of the other sectors in our industry are depressed these days. Lack of public sector spending, and I think there's a real opportunity here to actually commercialise green, commercialise sustainability, and that in itself is going to provide a benefit globally. It's about injecting more cash into the actual society and providing jobs. And I think that's the last thing, that this can actually provide a boost to the economy, the global economy and the local economy, by actually capturing some of the actual opportunities that are out there. So moral obligation, 2, commercialise, and 3, actually providing a boost to the economy.